it's funny when you talk about like getting your first loan, it just reminds me of like, you come out of college, you look for that entry level position and it says you need 5 years worth of experience. It's the same thing. It's like, how can I get the experience when you won't let me get the loan to buy the first property? And that's why I hear so many people go down that joint venture route. And I think it provides a tremendous amount of value and allow you getting your foot in the door. And that's how I got started with John, myself, my mom, my cousin. Same type of things, a little bit different. We were looking more for the experience side than necessarily the loan side, but yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it's just a way to utilize other people to allow yourself to get foot in the door and take some work off other people. So just so I understand, did you quit the job because you hated it and then you just went right into fix and flip once you figured you couldn't buy the apartment complex? Is that right?
Yeah, so I was spending time, I was knocking on doors, right? I got a deal, I want to do this deal. And they're like, yeah, no. And so, but I didn't have anybody in my network that done it, right? And I think that's a challenge for a lot of people is they don't know anybody that's done it. Today, I know a whole lot more. Like I know about, go to a conference, you can meet people at conferences, listen to podcasts and join meetup groups or join private Facebook groups. Like there's a whole lot of places where you can meet people today. But back when I was trying to get into the space, I didn't really understand any of that. Like the only conferences that I went to were for the power industry, which is where I was working, and my company paid for that. To think that I would spend money to go to a conference for my own business was kind of foreign to me. But, as you grow up, I guess you learn. And so I've learned a ton on the journey.
That's funny. I was just on a panel where it's part of Michael Blanc's Dealmaker Live, which is next weekend or 2 weekends from now. And I was on a panel with 5 other guys, and we were talking about exactly that. And it's basically, what's one thing you can do to scale your business? And every one of us gave our recommendations. And when I started my business, when I started on the multifamily side, not the original investment side, I was stubborn as shit. I still am, but no partners, no nothing. I'm doing this by myself, partially because I don't want to lose people's money. Second of all, I just said, I don't need help. Who needs help in this business, right? And it was fun. It worked. I even, when I first met Chris and his cousin, I said, guys, do this. I know it's going to make some money. And maybe they were like, maybe not. But the one piece of advice that I gave, that I tell people all the time, do whatever, when you first start, as many deals as you possibly, maybe it's raising money, maybe it's asset management, maybe it's renovation. Just get involved in any amount of projects, because what you're going to do, maybe the project works, maybe the partnership lasts, maybe it falls apart, maybe you never do another deal. But when you go to meetups, when you meet people, even if it's just, hey, I'll check in on your property once a month for you, if it's an out-of-state person, what you're now doing is you're building a resume or a credibility sheet that now a bank will take you more serious, or now an investor will take you more serious. And it's not, if you're just driving a property for somebody, it may not appear as experience, but it's how you phrase that, not what you did, right? It's, it's what you put down as saying, I've been driving properties, I've been touring properties, I've been working on properties, I've been the eyes and ears, boots on the ground for 12 months. So you're 100% right, where out of the box, it may seem like, shit, I can't do this. How do I figure it out? And you slowly learn. But I tell people all the time, just, get involved. The first 3 projects I did, one was my own, one was an investment, and one I helped raise some money for. And, within 6 months, I had 100 units, 150 units, and the doors just blow open, right? Now all the banks are like, oh, wow, look, you know what you're doing. I had no idea what I was doing. Nobody knew what they were doing, but that is what they need to say, check off the box, experience as a, super sophisticated investor, 100 doors in 6 months. What does that mean, right? Now we have 2,500 apartments now, and we know probably less today than we did when we started, because it's just different. So I give you a ton of credit for figuring it out, because most people quit right there and they're like, I can't do this. I'll just go back, or I'll do something different. You were persistent and you made it happen. And it's that guy that came over to you and said, what do you know about it? Next thing you know, bang, there's your deal. And it's just, it's not right place, right time. It's the hard work that was put in to be the expert when some guy asks you a question. And that's where, the value comes from.
Yeah. I think it's crazy because, like, I got my professional engineering license, right? And I know less today about engineering than I did the day before I took the test, right? And it's like with the banks, the day after you close that first loan is, you know, a whole lot less because you're actually in the property and you know what you don't know, or you're finding out what you didn't know that you thought you knew when you made all the assumptions when you made the model.
Yep.
It's crazy when you figure out how much you really don't know. And when you see new people come into the space, how overconfident they are about how they're going to do this. And, you know, I thought the Kent Clovier episode that you guys did was phenomenal because he was talking about like getting punched in the face and how people just assume like this thing is easy and how much they disrespect the craft, right? Like if everybody that starts this journey definitely doesn't get to a deal. And a lot of people who start the deal end up losing money because they forget that they actually have to execute a business plan. All the hoopla around sourcing money and sourcing deals is not even the beginning of the battle. Like,
I was gonna say, that might be the fun part, and you think you've overcome this major obstacle, and you have, but your journey's about to begin because it's, you know, it's amazing. You know, you could put any model together, and this is why brokers probably hate me today and they loved me prior to, because when they want to throw something in my face or they put these projections together, what I do now, and for all the brokers listening, you probably got it from me. I take their pro formas from 4 or 5 years ago and 3 years ago, and I send them to them when they relist the deal, and the deal's actually performing worse than their projections. And then they have new projections in their new offering or their new book. I'm like, why should I believe that your projections are right? And it's not the broker, it's their teams and the underwriters at the company. Like, you guys missed so poorly on the last one, and now you want me to bite off into, you know, you can raise rents, you could lower expenses, you could do this. We have, you know, we've had 4,000 units. This is not a possibility. Your insurance isn't going to be this. You don't have taxes going up, right? And these are little things that maybe a new investor that, you know, gets that excitement doesn't realize until they get into a deal and they get punched or they get kicked or they get knocked down. And then you got to get up and figure it out. And that just makes you battle tested. And now your experience is there, right? Now you're really an investor. You're not just doing this for a hobby or a sport or for fun, which is nothing wrong with that. But if you want to make it a full-time business, the hobby component of it probably has to go away at some point.
I am going to say something in defense of brokers, though. They're not the ones that actually operate the property and decide on the final business plan. So I get your point 100%. Okay. But at the end of the day, it's like, you know, we always say, right, how many times do we say, you know, your business plan goes out the window as soon as you buy the property because something's going to go wrong. So yes, I hear you. And 85% of the time, I think their projections are way too aggressive, but I do think you have to allow for some scenarios where the person who bought it just had no clue what they were doing. I mean, we just saw the one property in Indy where the NOI was lower than it was 4 years ago, and they're looking for double the price per door. You know, clearly they didn't operate a good business plan. Is that the broker's fault? I mean, there's obviously opportunity there. So I don't know.
So yes, occasionally that is the accurate statement. But when you're buying it from, you know, a professional person that's owned a couple thousand units and they've also messed it up, especially when the market's been so frothy, you got to realize at some point it's a game of hot potato. And you're right. You're 100% right. I'm
just keeping you honest over here. That's all. Somebody's got to put somewhat of a leash on you.
That's true. Because I am torching the ground that I walk on now and not caring. I'm just not seeing the value in people right now, right? There's just no one's bringing something to the table. So it's, you know, hey, if you're not going to bring anything to the table, you know, get on my list because, you know, we'll find it ourselves if you don't want to produce it. But
for sure,
it's intriguing to see how it's going to play out.
I wanted to go back quick because I thought you said something interesting, John, about like even just driving properties for people. And I know what's going to happen is a lot of people are going to discount that. But there's something to be said, like we've driven properties our whole lives or driven by properties our whole lives. Until I started working in apartments, I didn't even know there were apartment buildings on Long Island. I didn't know they existed. They were just buildings in my periphery. But now, whenever I notice it, I look at it from the lens of a real estate owner and investor, and I look at it completely differently. It's the same thing now where I drive through towns, you know, I just moved out east on Long Island. I'm driving through towns I haven't been in 10 years. And I'm looking at it through the eyes of an investor. Like, okay, this is like, you know, a B area, C area, A area. and you just look at it totally differently. So once you start going out and looking at properties with the idea of, hey, I'm going to buy, I'm going to invest in this property and this area, you start carrying a different lens with you that you're going to bring forward into so many other things. So I feel like a lot of people would have just glossed over what you said. And I think it's way more impactful and important than a lot of people are going to give credit to, especially once you then take that observation and you bring it back to whoever you're working with who has more experience, and you start having conversations around that property and they can explain to you, hey, why this is good, why this is bad. You know, retail is around the corner, you know, shitty retail is around the corner. You know, there's so many things that go into it. I just didn't want people to gloss over and not be like, that I'm not going to do that. That's grunt work. There's a lot of value you can actually get from it.
One of the best tips I ever got when I first started this real estate journey, right? I was working full time. And once I quit my job, maybe like 2013, 12, I actually, maybe a little bit of, about 2012, let's call it. I sat down with a real estate investor and he was a real estate agent. And he was doing a lot of fix and flips. And I sat down with him and this is probably the best piece of advice I ever got that I could not, if anyone listening hears it, I mean, you want to flip houses, you want to be a real estate investor. He told me the best time to drive properties is when you're coming out of winter and you're going into spring, you know, in that period, and then shortly into the summer for two reasons. He's also said, get in your car Saturday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning and drive, because if there's no cars in the driveway, it might be vacant. Additionally, in that period of time, if you see the grass is really long, if you see that you're coming out of winter and there's a tarp on the roof, you can see things that as a regular person you're driving by, you probably don't notice. But when I drive around now, I joke around and I'm like, oh, look at this, you know, this person's probably dead, right? Or, you know, because you notice things that you've never noticed before. And that alone could be the best thing you've ever done as a real estate investor, or starting, just getting in your car or walking out your front door and walking 5, 6, 7 neighborhoods in the morning, because you'll see if there's cars there. You'll see the activity that's going on Saturday morning at 6 o'clock. Who's not home, right? So you'll notice things and you'll see, oh, wow, look at this. Like, the grass is really long. There's a lot of mail in the mailbox. But little things like that was the first piece for me to get involved in real estate, where it's, to be a real estate investor, you got to drive properties. You got to tour properties. You got to get inside of properties, because if you've never done it and you walk into a property, you may think it's a great deal, whether it's a fix and flip, a multifamily, a retail deal, whatever it is. You may walk in and say, wow, this is beautiful, but you've toured one deal, so you have nothing to compare it to. So if you do that, I mean, that in itself, write down the address, go online, look it up, see what's going on. I mean, that alone will give you more experience than anything else. I mean, and that's how I started. After hearing that guy, I was like, holy shit. It was like eye-opening to me, because then once you hear, it's like when you buy a new car, right? You buy a new car, when you pull out of the dealership, what is the only car you see on the road? Your car. Same thing.
Yeah.
When you hear what to look for and you start looking, you see it. But if you didn't know that, you just drive past things and you don't even notice it. So I can't thank that guy enough. Additionally, I think anyone listening, if you haven't started or you're struggling to start, you know, find some property.